project I've been working on in Hackney. It's actually based on an American model. I don't know if you know the novelist Dave Eggers, but he's set up this amazing series of young people's writing centers in America. And the first one was in San Francisco. And from the outside, it looks like a pirate supplies store. So you can buy everything that the modern day pirate might need, a peg leg, parrot feed, eye patches, all this sort of thing. And once you go into the pirate store, there's a secret door, and you go through the secret door, and in the back is a workshop space for young people. They can come in and do creative writing, one-to-one with a mentor. They can work on their homework if they want to. They can read, and it's a quiet, nice space for them to do their work. And now they've popped up all over. It worked so well, they popped up all over America. There's an amazing superhero supply store in Brooklyn. And you can go in and get your cape fitted, and you get a cape and you stand in the wind tunnel to make sure that it flutters in the right way. And then again, there's a secret door, and you go in the back, and it's local writers volunteering their time. So obviously Brooklyn's a very artistic area. There's lots of writers who are willing to help out, working one-to-one with young people, getting them writing, getting them interested, helping them with their work. And the one in London, the Ministry of Stories, is from the front, it looks like the Hoxton Street Monster Supply Store, which is the shop for all your contemporary monsters' needs. So there's tins of fear, because the modern monster obviously doesn't have time to do all their own scaring. So there's escalating panic in tins, and mortal terror in tins, and there's neck bolt tighteners and fang floss and all this sort of thing. It's amazingly convincing facade just in a normal shopping street in East London. And once the kids, you kind of, when you're in there, you see them like stop at the window and stare in, stunned, and then they come in and they look around, and it takes them about 2 minutes before it's totally normal. And they're like, yeah, of course, a monster shop. Why wouldn't there be a monster shop? That makes sense. And then they come to the secret door, and their imaginations are kind of set on fire by that imaginative leap of seeing the monster store. And then once they come in, they're really charged up, and they do fantastic writing, and we have workshops helping them design their own monsters and write stories for them, and we have illustrators come in, and it's all based on volunteers. So we've got 600 volunteers now in East London, and it's really, really exciting, and seems to be going very, very well. We've only been open for 3 months, but it's a very good project, and hopefully will expand.
And are these all published writers, these volunteers?
They're not all, but there are quite a lot. We've got Zadie Smith coming in to do a workshop, Nick Hornby, David Nichols, lots and lots of big authors are offering their time. But the main body of the volunteers are actually just most of them not published or, semi-published writers. But
We have a question there.
Well, Joe, what I want to ask, how much is the role of innate capability in creativity, and how much it can be acquired? It is like seeing the program on television for making certain recipes, and one is what Mama cooks, and the taste which Mama cooks is the best as compared to what you see on the television.
Yeah.
So how much is the creativity workshop is that you have the tools of creativity, that how to write from very elementary, how to pick up the piece of paper, what to write first and things like. One is that it comes like an intuition. You get my idea?
I get your idea. I think, do you want a percentage?
May I make a sort of...
Yes, please do.
And then please go ahead. And I'm just going to remark one thing. The advantage of seeing the thing on television is very simple, because my mother didn't know how to cook, let us say, Thai chicken. So now if she cooks the Thai chicken, I'm very happy. So innate capability and knowledge.
Yeah. I mean, my feeling is it's probably more innate capability. It's more important to have innate capability than it is to have the teaching. I mean, otherwise there wouldn't have been writers in the past. Obviously, throughout history, there have never been any creative writing workshops, and it's not been a problem. So, for the most part, you need your innate palate and cooking talents, and then there's a small bit where having the recipe would help. So I think it's probably fair to say innate capability is the more important factor.
Okay, I want to talk a bit about your novel. I want you to talk a bit about your novel, Submarine. I want you, let's hear about it, its genesis and how you, where you see it going.
Sure.
And I seem to remember somewhere reading something about, I've not read it,
Yeah.
in fairness, but I do remember a review in which Salinger's Catcher in the Rye was mentioned as a point of comparison. Catcher in the Rye has iconic status
Yeah.
as a book.
I mean, that's very flattering and kind of probably a bit gushing comparison. I think probably a lot of writers. I mean, it's both kind of cripplingly I mean, I love Catcher in the Rye, so hearing that obviously makes me very proud, but I don't really buy into it. But anyway, the book is called Submarine, and it's a coming-of-age story, I suppose, like lots of first novels. It's semi-autobiographical, although I probably wouldn't tell my friends and family that. And it's about a young boy, 15 years old, and he suspects that his mother's having an affair with a martial arts instructor, and it's basically the story of him following and kind of stalking the man he thinks she's having an affair with. It's also the story of the normal teenage angst and wanting to find a girlfriend and all this sort of stuff. So it's set in my hometown of Swansea, and yeah, it's strange. It's a mix of things that really were my life when I was growing up, and obviously leaps of imagination. It's interesting, we're talking about the kind of mix of innate and taught. So it's this mix of authentic knowledge that I grew up with and I was just referring to real things, and leaps of imagination. So the father in the book is essentially my real father, and who was a depressive, and for lots of my youth was quite depressed. And then the mother in the book, largely because my real mother was actually very lovely and didn't have any problems, which is no good for fiction, has been discarded, and in favour of her, this neurotic, adulterous mother has been brought in. So it's kind of like a strange experience for my parents, where they read a novel where my father is married to a different woman, which is unsettling. But yeah, so and it's just been made into a film in the UK, which comes out in March, and yeah, it's been out for 2 years now.
You know, I read a blurb about it and I find it a bit comical, the way you have presented it. So there's a character who will follow certain written texts and try to, patch up between their parents and all. But the way it was presented was very comical, because you could actually take up the entire scenario in a very tragic way too. But how do you try to do it in a comical way? Because in reality, for a child, it might not be a very comforting situation.
That's a good point, and it's interesting that the comedy it's all first person narrated. So the comedy comes from the character tells you about his life, and in a 15-year-old way is quite deluded and self-confident and believes in himself a lot. So the comedy often comes between what he's telling you and the reality. So as a reader, he's telling you, well, I think I successfully convinced my mother to stop seeing this man. And then you hear the conversation and you're like, you didn't convince her of anything, she thinks you're an idiot. But that's the gap between. So the comedy, the jokes aren't kind of punchline jokes.
Joe, is it like deliberate that you're using comedy to put across ideas that might be very bitter? Or
I think
is it comes to you as naturally? Is comedy your style? Or
it does come naturally to me, but I always think comedy can be a very powerful way of addressing things which are darker or upsetting. Especially, it's not the character who's laughing, but the reader. So that there's still an emotional. He's still feeling emotions. He's not kind of laughing his way through these situations. But I think when you laugh at a book or a piece of writing, it takes you empathizing before you laugh. Especially if you're laughing at a character, you have to have engaged with the character enough to laugh. So there's that element of, if you can get a reader laughing, then they're actually engaged.
Yeah, I think that happens with all of us in real life too. Because if we are living in a situation, a tragic situation, we feel bad about it. But if we step outside and look at from outside, sometimes we find it all very comical, right? So, it's very.
That's slapstick. I mean, that's the whole thing of, from a distance, seeing someone fall over, you laugh. As they get closer to you, if they fall over again, you still laugh. Suddenly they're very close to you, you no longer laugh, and you help them up. So there's some as a reader, you've got that distance and you can kind of laugh at them.
A little more on the poetry, if I could come to that for the moment. Okay, OUP is a great publisher, one of the greatest. But for anybody writing poetry, there is no publishing house greater than Faber and Faber. And Joe has been, of course, published in the Faber Poets. Joe, would you care to read one of the poems that you've...
I'd love to, yeah.
Keep the other one for later.
Yeah.
No, read one for now. Read
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Page poem
I'll
for
read a
now.
page poem, yeah.
Yeah.
Hello? Yeah, thanks. So yeah, this is the pamphlet. It's called Faber New Poets 5, and it's in a series of pamphlets about, there's 8 of them, and each is kind of the first pamphlet for a young poet. So there's just 20 poems in here, and they're kind of my first, I suppose it's like my best of from the last decade. This poem is about, I don't know if you know, in scuba diving, there's this experience called nitrogen narcosis, which is when a scuba diver reaches a certain depth, I think it's from 30 meters and below, they can sometimes experience a kind of psychosis, and that can come across as becoming very childish, or becoming, silly or playful or drunk seeming, or stupid. And so they have this test that they do when they're 40 meters beneath the sea. They get out a chalkboard, they have an underwater chalkboard, and they write a simple sum. So it'll be like 2 + 3, and you show it to your friend, and the other person has to write it, and they have to get it right within a certain amount of time. And if they take too long, then that means that they're suffering from this narcosis and psychosis, and then they have to go back up to the surface. So it's an interesting, very dangerous side effect of deep sea diving. And me and my girlfriend were told about this by someone who'd experienced it, this kind of very experienced diver in Mexico. And he told us about an experience he had when he was in a cave dive, and he dived to the bottom of the cave, and at the bottom, the nitrogen narcosis didn't affect him that badly. It just gave him a very powerful childhood memory that came back to him. And the memory was of being underneath his parents' table. So in the sea, he was lying on his belly at the bottom of a cave, and he remembered being underneath his parents' kitchen table, looking up at them, going around and seeing the underneath of the table, and how strange everything looks when you're small and looking up at things. I thought it was a really interesting idea. There's one word in here which I'll just explain before I read it. It's halocline. Halocline is where the salt water meets the fresh water, often in caves, and there's a kind of meter of misty water. So as a diver, you're going down from the salt water into the fresh, and for a while you can't see, and it's quite unnerving. So it's called cave dive. Every 16 meters of depth is equivalent to 1 alcoholic drink, and that's a quote from the Diver's Handbook. He remembers being 6, lying on his back beneath a kitchen chair, gazing up at his father's unmapped nostrils, his mother's skirt riffling past like a spotted eagle ray. Underneath the dining table, he found pencil marks, a quarter circle, and 2 words underscored, possible extension. Back then, it was a code, or perhaps the solution to a code. On the cave bed, it takes a blue whale's long blink to fathom what 1 + 1 turns into. The sky peers down from blue-green slots like the lamp fittings of his youth. His slow mind thinks time is just another surface he can pass through the swirling halocline that keeps us from our pasts, the fresh and the preserved. Back in his father's study, pouring a bag of marbles across the rug. In the glow from the tentacled lampshade, he holds up his bossa, sees himself swimming in its spiral reef. Letting drift his aqua lung, he is either young or drunk. From his lips he scatters balls of glass.
Thank you, Joe. And that was interesting. I like the rhythms are fascinating in that. I like the way you've sort of brought stresses together into the blue whale's long wink, jamming up of stresses that makes very interesting effects. Sorry, please, anybody else want to say anything? Yes?
It's pretty good. I really like it. But I have a question about poetry. If you could talk a little about the craft of writing poetry in terms of its formatting. And also, thank you. Yes, if you can talk a little about the craft of writing poetry in terms of its formatting. And also if you can talk a little about the relationship between critical thinking and creative writing.
So by formatting, do you mean kind of line breaks and...
In terms of the aesthetics
The
of
prosody.
writing.
Do you mean the prosody in that formatting?
Well, it comes from a creative point of view, I understand that, but once you have to write something which has to be proper, in terms of it's written proper, I know poetry is very open as to how you want to write it, but if there is a format to it, or if there should be a format to it, and how you should properly write poetry.
Do you mean rhyme and meter?
Yeah, in a way, yes.
Terrible stuff. Go ahead.
Not an easy question. Salman, do you think you can sum that up in a